Ho 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 everybody, and welcome to the next celebration of Christmas, with the next game of this video being Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Mega Drive. Let's snow it off!
Speaking of which, did you know that if you take away the A in said name, Sega means slow in Swedish? Kind of ironic, isn't it? Now, despite having many releases with a lot of later games being improvements on the character, the original is remembered fondly and is considered a classic to this very day. So, now we're in the season that gets, so we have no reason not to check it out. Let's do this. Kicking off the game, we got introduced to something very rarely seen on this console, a jingle. Maybe? It's a single word that, maybe. What is more iconic with this title screen? With this guy, Sonic wagging his oversized finger either at the player or someone in the background. You'll be the judge. Oh, level 1, Green Hill Zone, with a very iconic layout and the melody that really pumps you up. Yeah! What is the problem with this melody? It sounds like a stretched out rubber band. Why is it so slow? I will tell you why, peeps. Because of the TV standards at the time. Basically, way back there when there was PAL and NTSC, with PAL being Europe while NTSC being in America, meaning the game runs on more frames per second in America more than in Sweden. It kinda ruins the melody a little bit, and it did catch me off guard. So anyway, the goal with the game, much like most games at the time, is to beat all of the levels and then reach the end so you can beat the boss. With the boss in question being somebody I'm sure you recognize. But of course, let's talk about it until later. Now the most important thing to you is to move forward from point A to point B, and you have to jump upon enemies, collect rings, as well as hit checkpoints so you can actually reach the end before, well, there isn't really much of a reason to actually be concerned about not making it to the finish line. But you do have a timer, and if you want to race against the clock, well, be my guest. I don't really think it generally happens that you actually have to beat the time somehow. Maybe. Anyway, like I said before, this is a game nature versus machines, and you will tell there is a machine bit to this game, and that's with the enemies. As you can see with the layout, there's plenty of mechanical enemies. Such as these fish, there are chameleons. Basically, all of them are machines, while the background and environment itself is nature. Of course, I don't really know if nature generally does a checkered pattern platforms as well as platform. So anyway, you are going through several different zones. There are 2 standard levels in each and every zone, and then a boss fight. Now this boss fight is really very much iconic, and it is based on Dr. Eggman. Hit him several times, avoiding his wrecking ball in order to pass through to the next level. Now of course, while it does sound like child's play and it is decently easy, don't get fooled by the difficulty of this game. It can get kind of difficult. It's not necessarily because it's difficult, it's just weirdly programmed. With the most evident theme being that whenever you get hit by something, you drop all of the rings, and if you actually lose all of your rings and get hit once more, well, it's game over. And believe me, there are situations where you will caught off guard, and then you will have to basically force yourself to get as much as possible before it's too late. And the thing is, this environment is just really weird. Cause let's imagine if you were somebody living in Green Hill Zone and you all of a sudden looked at this architecture. Would you really think it's normal when there's like ramps, there are tubes, and there are spikes out of the ground? There is something really weird too, and that is if you're able to collect at least 50 rings and pass through the goal post, you will see this ring appear in midair. Go through it, and then you'll be taken to one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. This, my friends, is the bonus level of this game, and with this bonus level you have to basically survive for an obstacle course while we're collecting the very famous Chaos Emeralds. I have to break all of these small squares in order to reach through it. And if you don't do exactly that, well, you will inevitably go to the exit. And believe me, this is far more difficult than what it may seem. The controls, while they work for the most part, are not really the most comfortable in this very situation. You have to really stay as focused as possible. As you can see by the footage of this of my playthrough, well, it did not exactly work out well. So anyway, after beating Green Hill Zone, it is now time to move on to the next zone, which is known as Marble Zone. Now, this zone is really all based around ancient Greece, as you can see, and it's already a big surprise. When you step on this very platform, flames appear, and you have to avoid them as quickly as possible. It did catch me off guard, and at this point you begin to realize one of the flaws with this game that doesn't really get talked about much, and that is how the layout changes. From being mostly speed focused in the first zone to also just being more based around puzzles as you head down into these ruins. However, the next zone, Marble Zone, like I said, is kind of weird compared to the first zone. And the thing is, very rarely does people talk about Marble Zone. They really only talk about it in terms of one thing, and that is the music. You know what? Speaking of which, now with that being said, the music itself is quite decent. It's actually composed with something known as chiptunes. Now that is what the music on this sound chip is referred to nowadays. It's a very popular style of music used within retro gaming. Now of course, given the fact that this console came out before the Super Nintendo, the music does sound a bit weird, like someone is crumbling potato chips, thus making it inferior to the Super Nintendo music at some places. But composers have been able to use it really well, and it does sound far greater on the Sega Genesis compared to the Super Nintendo, with this music specifically just being far better to listen to on the Sega Genesis compared if it was actually used in a Super Nintendo game. Mwah! Chef's kiss. So anyway, the animation as well as the game itself runs decently well, and I will say this, the backgrounds, especially in the first level, generally does shine. There are times when the game looks really beautiful and has aged really well. There are of course some aspects where the game hasn't aged well, particularly with the animations. But given the fact that this is an early Genesis game, it's excusable, it's understandable. You could understand that this looked really good at the time, and even to this very day it has this charm, and even in the worst of times graphically, I would say this game looks decently good for what it is. However, I will say this, don't get fooled for what the game has in store. It does have its ups, it has its downs, with the biggest flaw being of course that the game is not really that fast. It's more or less a platformer. Because let's be real, Green Hill Zone is the most iconic location in this entire game, and that is what's really shown up in trailers as well as either people reviewing this game online. Later zones, they are more based around solving puzzles, with the most evident case being of course this one. It's not bad, but it's kind of flawed in some places, and in others it's an absolute masterpiece. I will say this, however, this is still a classic, and somebody that want to experience the past with gaming should absolutely give this one a try. Fun fact, this is actually a game that I bought for my Sega Mega Drive instead of being one of the first. But you know, stuff happens and you make some decisions based on some others at certain points, which may or may not be good for you. But overall, despite the flaws, it is still a classic, and this is absolutely something that you could see under your Christmas tree at some point and be really happy about. Alright, that's everything. Thank you.